Hello, team. It's time for the Daily Detangler. Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you listen to this. I'm enjoying that music. How about you? Let's talk about making concepts tangible, introducing concepts, communicating concepts, and this idea of tangible. It's an interesting thing. I was working on something with a team member and had a conversation, and then with activator and catalyst, and then this idea of how do we figure out how to make something tangible and like inputs that I need versus outputs that I might need. And when I was working with a client, I just kept hearing, how do we make that more tangible, or how do we make that actionable, right? It's a repeating phenomenon that requires not only inputs from a lot of different places, but some sort of structure and process. And that's what Catalyst talks about. So this episode of the Daily Detangler is brought to you by the Catalyst conundrum, the difference between C and solution. And one of the things that he talks about in that conundrum is meeting clients where they are, which sounds great, right? In order to sell anything, meeting people where they are is critical. To share new ideas, meeting people where they are is critical. To perhaps even persuading people to act differently, it requires meeting people where they are. In the context of a transformation or entering into a new role, the idea of being like before you're different is meeting people where they are. And in the scene that he showed from Moneyball, in the movie, Billy Beane is the manager and he's talking to the scouts. And this is the scouts' belief. There's a lot of wisdom in this room. Let us do our job. Now, how do you become like before you become different? That in the movie Moneyball, there wasn't a lot of time for that because things had to change due to the nature of the challenge and due to the nature of the problem. If Billy Beane had decided to meet the scouts where they are, they would not have made it into the playoffs and been a contender to possibly make the World Series. So meeting people where they are doesn't mean rotating to the lowest common denominator. It means meeting people where they are. And sometimes that means confronting a different kind of reality, or perhaps being a bit confrontational. So how do you choose those battles and how do you back them up? And in the scene from Moneyball, the head scouts were very confident in what they were doing. They were so confident that they would, push back and even opt out of the new approach. And Billy Beane would say, look, you're acting like it's business as usual, and it's not. Where does that confidence come from? Both sides are very, very confident, highly confident. On the left, the confidence, where does that come from? And this comes from the status quo and the 20 or 30 years of where things have been. On the right, where does that confidence come from? It comes from the confidence of having investor support and support of management to drive a transformation and a change. It also has that confidence on the right, also comes from not only the belief around what needs to change, but the ability to make that change tangible. How does Billy Beane make it tangible to the scouts so that they have to make a choice, opt in or opt out? Obviously, this kind of decision isn't something to take lightly, and our clients are faced with this type of decision every day. What do they have to hold on to, and what do they have to share with others, and what do they have to persuade, other than their personality? or their relationships, which only get you so far. In the movie Moneyball, there was a lot of underpinning to that confidence that Billy Beane had. There was science, there was research, there was data, there was obviously the support of management, there was a understanding of how to frame out the challenge in a way that they could action, and he made that tangible. To help us with that, Catalyst shared in the conundrum, look, we just need to be documenting things we're doing right now. Sounds easy, right? Sounds simple. That simple is hard. So what are we doing right now? Well, we're doing a lot of things. I mean, if I listed all the things we're doing, but since I'm really focused on the detangler side of things, and the way in which I view the world is through a very specific lens that helps, make sense, try to make sense, and then try to do something different, and then try to apply it, right? That's the world I live in. Sometimes I can get overwhelmed with all the things that need to be documented or all the things that are going on right now. This is a big statement to somebody like me who tries to, not only internalize, but then act. So what I tend to think about, and where I've spent a lot of time, is on this idea of, look, if we can't communicate, we're kind of dead in the water. If I can't communicate my role, if I can't communicate in a daily detangler, if I can't communicate the level of change that I see that people need to make as they work in teams, if I can't help myself get plugged into team, these types of things are all part of and start with communication. And, we talk about, and double clicking into that, the idea that there's people who send messages and receive messages. And that is, to me, where I want to start, to detangle myself on, hey, how do we document all this stuff? What if I say, look, let me just treat this as a communication process. What can I send, and how would I, encode it? And then how would I transmit that so that it's easier for people to decode? Right. So isn't there something in the concept of quote unquote documenting that can help me encode, transmit, and decode, with the premise of, if I can't communicate, then how I can't help myself change, because I'm not going through the learning by doing process of trying to figure this out. And I cannot help others see, which is a critical component of change. And if they can't see, then we cannot create a shared understanding. So that's an important consideration. What kind of feedback can I create to help me make things better, right? So communication is this fuel that helps create shared understanding. The idea of, and I think that's the vein of what Catalyst is trying to say, is documenting things that are happening right now, putting C slides down, taking 2 minutes and making toast to try to just visualize anything, to add what you can into the pot of soup we're making. It's because communication is a critical ingredient of creating shared understanding. It's really hard for me to share this concept if I didn't have this visual. Could you imagine me trying to explain this without this visual? That's the power of a C slide, right? So one of the things that we hear a lot about is, let's make things more tangible. That's how I'm interpreting. We need more C slides. We need more documentation. This idea of making things tangible. And in the conundrum, Catalyst talked about, look, we need to make more things more tangible. Well, what is that? What is something more tangible? And how can I help? So I've got, a couple people here, and they have a desire for more tangible. And I went back through my detangler notes. I looked at a lot of detanglers, and when I was going through this conundrum, I was making lots of notes around this idea of, what are we trying to do? And I'm going to synthesize it down into kind of 3 things. To make something tangible, can I help people believe it? Can I help people internalize it? And can I help people apply it? The more I help people believe, the more they'll believe it's tangible. And if I make it relatable, whatever it is, the more tangible it becomes and the more believable it becomes. If I can help make it digestible and bite-sized, the easier it is for them to internalize it. And then if I can help them actually do something and take action, that will help make it tangible. If they can't see how to use it with somebody else, if they can't see how to use it with their team or whatever. So this becomes a bit of a, I don't know, a design point for this idea of let's document things. What can I do to document things so they're more relatable? What can I do to document things so they're more digestible? What can I do to make things, document things so that people can take action? And we have to do the work to make concept more tangible to others. And it's a type of work that's not in the how. It's all of this to me is in helping people see. So if I'm going to do that kind of work, why, right? And this is an interesting one because it's a different kind of work, right? In the space that we're in, it's kind of in this area of knowledge creation or knowledge production or intellectual property creation. We're in this space of creating something from nothing and putting it into slides. Like, for example, this whole content, all this content didn't exist this morning other than the encode, transmit, decode slide, right? So everything you're seeing here didn't exist an hour ago. I created something from nothing, but why? And what's the point of that, right? It's to make things more tangible. And in the Catalyst Conundrum, he asked the question, like, how do we help people experience these concepts? This was just a little tiny statement that he said, but it really rang in my ears because it's so much of what I've done in the past is create concepts and tell or explain concepts. Let me tell you the concept, let me explain it. But how do we help people actually experience these concepts? And and I was like, how do I do that? How do I take something here and make this concept tangible, right? Because I just came off of this idea of let me make it more tangible. So, hey, we need to help people experience concepts. Let's keep moving. But stop that for a second. How do I help make that tangible? What would I do? So I challenged myself with that. And I came up with this idea of, wine making, right? And wine is something that we can all relate to, but as a concept, winemaking as a concept. But how do I help people experience what I would visualize, or how would I help people experience the concept of winemaking? And then how would I help them structure it in a way that's digestible and actionable? Well, one thing I might do is say, look, you can experience winemaking at the source. We can take you to a vineyard and let you pick grapes. And we can talk about the experience of growing grapes, right? So take a deep breath and smell that mountain air. Let's go to Argentina and climb the mountains and let's experience the source of wine. And I'll tell you all about the difference between the soils and the climates and the types of grapes. And then we'll fly to France and we'll go pick grapes there. There's a lot of concepts that I can share just in experiencing the source. Then if I say, well, that's one type of experience, and those concepts related to that experience are completely different than the concepts related to the creation of the wine, the factory, the winery itself, the production process, the putting it in the barrels, the fermentation, the tasting, right? How do we produce this? Where do we store it? How long do we store it? Let's taste different types of wine. That experience and the concepts, there's so many concepts related to the experience of creating wine. And we could spend a lot of time there. We can go to different wineries. We can go to different types of back in the back areas and talk to the people who make the wine and what the production steps are, right? And then there's another thing that we can talk about in the context of winemaking, a third area, and it has to do with, selecting the wine and buying it itself. If that's a whole experience, and that experience of going online to wine.com and buying it, or going into a grocery store and buying it, or do you go to Total Wine and buy it there, or do you go to Wegmans and buy it there, right? So that whole experience we can talk about, all the concepts of buying wine and the experience of buying wine in those environments, and the how easy it is and all that. And we could go to a bunch of different areas and talk about how we buy wine. So these are all different experiences, and the concepts underneath each are different, right? So just in this, am I helping you see an experience? And am I helping us relate to that experience so that we can talk about the concepts? And in that view, there are almost unlimited concepts that I could help people to relate to. And creating the C slides, documenting things can help that happen. So it has to do with thinking it through, putting some structure together. This slide was hard. This was the hardest slide in this detangler to even come up with. And I guess maybe that's a whole other thing, but anyway, you have to tell me if it works for you. And am I landing the concept of helping people experience concepts? Am I landing that, right? Because that's the goal, is I'm trying to make this relatable. So did I make it relatable? So that's one aspect that Catalyst talked about in the conundrum. He also keeps harping on documenting things, right? So we need to document things. Sounds okay, duh, gotcha. It's like, hey kids, you need to go clean up your room. I'm a broken record on that. But what does that actually mean? Document things. What does that mean, right? So in the context of encode, transmit, decode, documentation is to me an encoding thing. And when I think about encoding, what am I encoding? Well, I'm encoding visuals with the C slides I make. And I'm then practicing the delivery of that C slide into something like a talk track. And if I can encode the visual and encode the talk track, I end up with something like a riff. And that riff helps us become more relatable. It helps us in this idea of becoming more tangible. And so I spend on the Daily Detangler a lot of time trying to build the visual. As I'm building the visual, I'm kind of role playing in my head what the talk track would be. But when you see the slide I make, I don't have speaker notes and I don't have multiple takes. The spoken side, the talk track side, is all in one take. It's only in one take. It's only in one shot, and there's no speaker notes. So and it forces me to rely on my C slide. So the most time I'll spend is maybe sequencing. So if I sequence the slides and then I just go for it. So that helps me create a riff, which means I'm practicing encoding what I observe, and that helps people see. So documentation of the visual and then practicing it in the spoken word and recording it can help people see through practice. After doing hundreds of these things, I think I can help people see a little bit better, but it's a process. And the challenge that I've been working on is, how do I make things more digestible, more quote unquote simple? So that digestibility is a key component of making something tangible. One of the ways that we can do that, and one of the things that Catalyst had us do a bunch of activities around, if you remember when this conundrum came out, was lean into a C-slide template. The C-slide template looks like this, and it helps simplify the encoding process, right? So it might feel a little bit forced, but it makes it easier to encode. By using the template, I can structure my thoughts, think through the concepts, focus on a compelling title, and then anchor that title. And I've been sloppy with the C-slide template in the past, and it was interesting. This was in the conundrum. I dug it up, I put it in here because it helps me make things digestible. And I was like, oh, you know what? I need to go back and put the statement at the bottom, the conclusion at the bottom on my C slides. So every slide that I've done in this detangler, I've tried to follow this template. And whereas in the past, I didn't have the template totally front of mind. So that's one of the things that I'm going to try to keep doing better, to try to use this template a little bit more, especially the question at the top and the conclusion at the bottom, with the goal of making it more digestible. The third area of making something tangible is this idea of actionable, I think. And action is an important concept in today's world. We hear a lot about it. How do you become more actionable? How do we put this into action? And really, right now, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a visceral reaction to too academic. I mean, people just really rail against it. So if they can't see how to apply something, you're dead on arrival. And I've seen this outside of our team, and I've seen it outside of our situations. So it's becoming kind of permeating all of business. So actionable is helping them act, so they can learn by doing. Okay, so what I'm bringing back is this idea of what am I doing to help people learn by doing? What am I helping do? Through my C slides, through my documentation, through my riffs, how do I help them in their process of learning by doing? And so that they can take the next step, right? So they can move forward, so that they can change and drive change. And if you break this down, what am I doing to document so that people will listen? What am I doing to document so that people can understand? What am I doing to document so that they can internalize it easier? What am I doing to help them practice? What documentation am I helping them practice to make it easier for them to practice? And what am I documenting to help them evolve over time? What am I building to contribute into that learning by doing process? And when I break it down this way, there are a lot of concepts here, and there's a lot I can be documenting. And I think a lot of what we do and what Catalyst does is really a great job at helping people listen. And he's had the feedback that, wow, you could do a masterclass in active listening. And Catalyst's role here gets people to listen. The challenge is do they understand, and can they internalize, and can they have the confidence to practice and then improve? That's where, in my role as detangler, I can do a better job to try to help people learn by doing. And there's a lot of concepts here that build off of. And if I say, look, what are they listening to, and what are they paying attention to, and what are they intrigued by? And then how do I help them understand it? That's a huge step forward of making something actionable. So actionable isn't just, is it done or did I act? Actionable is an install process almost, where step by step, people can visualize it, they can challenge it, they can build something, and they can receive feedback so that they can take the next step, whatever that step is. What is that step? Who knows? That's why it's blank over here. But whatever that next step is, how do we give them the confidence? Remember the Billy Bean confidence and the Scout confidence. How do we give them the Billy Bean confidence to take the next step? And that's actionable. So when I think about these things, this idea of relatability as a summary, because I've, spent a lot of time kind of going through these concepts, and I want to make the concepts more tangible, I think it would be beneficial to recap what I just said. So recapping, is it relatable? Which means, is it proven? Is it credible? And can people access it? Right? If they can't do those, it's not very relatable. Is it digestible? The scope of it and the structure of it. Is it something that's easily consumable? And then, is it actionable? Am I supporting their learning by doing process? And the more I do these things, the more simple things can get. These concepts can become. And making concepts more tangible then helps people act and makes it easier for them to learn by doing. And that's the concepts that I've gleaned from the Catalyst Conundrum today. And one of the things that I want to do is the next step is work through, how do I help make my concepts and what I want to get across more relatable and digestible and actionable. And then pay more attention to what people are listening to from Catalyst and help them understand what that is in search of, so to speak. Well, that's been today's Daily Detangler. Leading with me around what I've learned, about making something fuzzy like a concept more tangible. I've also wanted to put together this experience that kind of walks you through, did I take fuzzy concepts from the Catalyst Conundrum, and did I help you understand them, and did I help you make these more tangible? Right? So that I tried to create more of an experience there and connect the dots. And that's been today's Daily Detangler. I look forward to your feedback. Take care.